Hello, a very warm good morning to all of you and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. Welcome to today's The Hindu Newspaper Analysis, where we shall be analyzing few of the important topics and few of the important articles which have appeared in the Hindu newspaper for 6th of March 2023, and we shall be considering the Delhi edition for the discussion purposes. Now, before proceeding ahead with the topics that we are going to discuss today, after the discussion ends, immediately after that, you will have the objective questions-based quiz which shall be uploaded on our Telegram channel. And I basically suggest and advise all of you to do appear and attempt for that quiz in order to assess your level of understanding for that. Now, having said that, if we take a look at the topics that we are going to discuss today, so because the prelims examination is around the corner, so today the discussion shall also be oriented slightly in that regard, whereby we shall be discussing 4 of the important topics which have appeared in the newspaper, the bulky ones and the relevant ones, both for your prelims as well as for your mains examination. But along with that, we shall be picking up few of the important points which have appeared directly or indirectly, which can be relevant for your examination. Having said that, we shall be starting with the editorial pages of discussion, where we shall be discussing about India's foreign policy matters and utilizing India's movement under the diplomatic sun. So this is something which has appeared in the portion of editorial. And there we shall be discussing India's pink moment, so to say, when it comes to a kind of a diplomatic presidency that it has gained and the prominence that it has gained, being the chair and the president of Shanghai Cooperation Organization, of also the G20 presidency that India is holding right now. So that is something that we shall be analyzing. The hardships of a career in Ayurvedic practice. In this, we shall try to analyze what are the issues and also the relevant opportunities that lie ahead in terms of Ayurvedic practitioners and the practices that are being followed in the country. And why is it that it has not yet caught the momentum that it should have? Then, again, another portion of international relations that we shall be discussing, that is with regards to the future prospect of Libya. We shall be discussing why is it that in Libya we are unable to find a long-lasting peace and what are the implications the world over. Is it something that matters to the world or not? Again, that is something that we are going to discuss. Then again, what are biocomputers and how do they function? So this is again something based on science and tech. So both of these are going to be useful in your paper 3, right? And the IR ones in paper 2, both of them, the first and the third one, that is where you will find its utility both in paper 2 and 3. And these are few of the topics that we are going to discuss, which are going to be relevant for your prelims examination this year. Now, without further ado, let us straight away jump to the first topic of discussion, and that is utilizing India's movement under the diplomatic sun. Now, this is something which has appeared in page 6 of the Delhi edition of the newspaper, and this is relevant for your international relations. Now, what does this article tell us about? What is it that it is trying to convey? The basic about it, if you have to think about it in a very simple terms. So, India's movement under the diplomatic sun. When we talk about the terminology or when we use that terminology, it is his or her movement under the sun, or it is India's movement under the sun, means what? It is a kind of a bright spot of sorts. That means that it is boding well for that individual or for that country. Now, if you use that in this particular headline, the meaning turns out to be that right now we are utilizing or we are in a phase where everything is going well and we are at a level of prominence in the international and the global geopolitical community. Now, why is it that we say so? And what are the possible attributes associated with it? So first of all, if we throw some amount of context and we take a look at the background of this, as of now, we do know, because it is something which has been mentioned in media reports time and time again, we do know that as of now, India is the president of G20. And through this year, India shall be holding that coveted post. So, you have frequent meetings of G20 delegations which have been conducted and which are being conducted in the country. So India recently hosted G20 foreign ministers meeting, which was a very high profile meeting. And if you have been following the news headlines, everyone from Antony Blinken of United States to Sergei Lavrov of Russia, everyone came to India for that discussion. You even had the Chinese foreign minister coming in. So this is in itself a very significant moment. Because if we analyze about it, since the Russian war on Ukraine began, India provided the platform for the first time whereby the United States representative and the Russian representatives or the foreign ministers of different nations could actually be in the same room. That platform was lacking in the international geopolitical order for last 1 year. Then, that is why it was a very high profile meeting. Then the G20 finance ministers meeting, the Quad foreign ministers meeting. Now what is Quad? Quad is a grouping of like-minded countries in the region of Asia Pacific, inclusive of India, Japan, Australia, and United States. These are the ones who think about their strategic future to be aligned, and that is why you had the Quad grouping. So even the Quad foreign ministers meeting happened on 3rd of March. Thereafter, along with that, you also had the External Affairs Ministry backed the Raisina dialogue, which was held between 2nd to 4th of March, where you even had the Italian president making a keynote speech, rather the Italian prime minister making that keynote speech. So that is where India has been hosting a lot of global dignitaries and the global decision makers and policy makers who have come to India, and thereby they are expressing their own country's views and also taking a stock of where India stands in the current geopolitical spectrum. Now, a few weeks ago, India also organized Voice of Global South Summit, that is between January 12 and 13. Now, Global South here is indicative of the group of nations or a group of states who significantly are behind in the developmental ladder and who are categorized under the developing and underdeveloped or least developed countries. Now, these countries also have certain requirements of development, certain requirements and certain issues that they face with regards to climate change and so on. So that is why Global South slowly and steadily is becoming an important center of global geopolitics. So India is also hosting a meeting of that and trying to become a voice of the Global South. Along with that, India's pivotal position at the G20, the Quad, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, for which again India is the chair this year, and the Global South today has given it a sudden surge in stature and reputation. So overall, what does this signify? This tells you that at this point of time, India is in the limelight for all the variety of reasons. From the aspect of the G20 to the Quad to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization to being the member of the Global South and an ardent and an argumentative member of the Global South. So India is at this point of time riding many boats at once. Now, by the way, from this portion itself, you can have the germination of many different types of prelims-based questions. For example, which are the nations of G20? Which are the nations of Shanghai Cooperation Organization? What are the nations of Quad? So you can have these basic questions which can always be framed. When you talk about the members of G20, here we have 19 countries and the European Union, which together end up forming the G20. Now, if you want to learn this, in case at all that you are interested in learning this, I would advise you to learn it with the help of the continent data. For example, when we talk about a continent like South America, which are the countries in South America which are relevant enough to be a part of G20. So you will have Argentina and you will also have Brazil. Then when we talk about, let's say, North America, which are the countries which are important and relevant enough to be a part of G20. So again, you will have Mexico, Canada, and United States. So accordingly, if you follow this approach, it will be easier for you to memorize, if at all you want to memorize this. That is the approach you can follow to get a grasp over which are the countries which belong to G20. Now, when we talk about G20, it has got a rotational presidentship. So India took over the baton of presidentship from Indonesia, and will continue to be the president up till the end of 2023. It is because of this that India is getting the opportunity to host global dignitaries and global leaders who are coming to India for various discussions and dialogue. Now here, the balancing act that India as a nation is playing, that is something which is being lauded in various different policy circles. Now, what is this balancing act? When we say that India indeed is playing a balancing act, what do we mean by that? Or what is the implication of that? So here, one has to understand that simultaneously, India is managing to be the president of the Western countries backed G20 Union, as well as the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is led by China. So think about it. In a scenario or in a world where China and the West, they don't look eye to eye, in a world or a scenario where Russia and the West, they don't look to each other eye to eye, in that scenario, India is holding the presidency of two groups, two global groupings simultaneously at the same point of time. So that tells you the important balancing act that India is doing. And when we say balancing act, India is ensuring that nobody's interests, they are harmed. At the same time, everybody is propagating towards global one ship, and also the world being one family. So the global peace is always on the agenda here. So that is the balancing of the West and the Russia that India is doing significantly well and ably well here. Now also simultaneously, India is being heard as the voice of the global South. And when we say the global South, here the implication is the less developed and developing nations. For example, you have many countries in the region of Africa, you have many small island nations which are present across the entire world who are not significantly higher up in the developmental spectrum or the developmental ladder, but they also have their needs and demands which the world needs to hear about. And for that, they need a powerful friend for that matter, and that is where countries such as China and India, they have always stepped in, be it issues with regards to climate change, where the entire world negotiates about common but differentiated responsibility. Now, ideally, the developed nations of the world, even when they negotiate the protocols and the conventions with regards to climate change, they always have that kind of an approach where everyone is equally responsible for climate change, which is not the case. The global South significantly is not emitting that much, but at the same time is at the receiving end of the effects of climate change. So that is where the voice of the global South needs to be heard. And when we say the voice of the global South, here it also comes about the matters of food security, also aspects such as energy security, also aspects such as commodity prices. Okay? Now, all these developing and underdeveloped nations, they are significantly facing this issue. The food prices across the world, they are escalating. The commodity prices across the world, be it that of fuel, be it that of metals, everything is escalating and rising across the entire world. Now, in that scenario, the developmental requirements of millions and billions of people who live at a lower economic level, that is something which is put to test. And that is where you need a global voice to talk about these at international forum. And that is what India is doing. That is why India is holding conventions and dialogues for the global South. For a long period of time, traditionally, China is the country which has occupied and taken this role. And China calls itself a leader of the global South, despite the fact that China has moved significantly up in terms of per capita income, in terms of the economic standard, and so on. But still, having said that, now India is the one which is in limelight, and that is something that India needs to continue. Then, simultaneously, India is also balancing the Quad and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Now, why are these two placed simultaneously? Because when we talk about the Quad consists of the countries such as United States, Japan, India, and Australia. Now here, the entire grouping that you see, one of the prime purposes of the entire grouping is to control and in a way limit the hegemony and the hegemonic tendencies exhibited by the Chinese leadership in the region of Asia Pacific. And the entire world knows about it by now that China has got an expansionist tendency where it tends to expand its territorial control and also its territorial claims in each other's and the neighboring countries as well. So in order to bring a check to that, these countries have come together and formed the Quad. And Quad is something which is coordinating on the matters of defense, on the matters of strategy, on the matters of also people-to-people exchange, technological transfers, and so on. Now here, simultaneously, India is also holding the chair for Shanghai Cooperation Organization, a regional grouping which is China-led, where China is the dominant founding member of that Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So that is something which indeed is a balancing act. And this is something that India has been maintaining all along. If you take a look at the stance held by the country since that Russian war on Ukraine started, the entire world has been nudging India to take a stand against Russia or a complete open stand towards Russia if possible. But India has always maintained that the world is no longer bipolar or unipolar. It is a world of multilateralism where many players, they will have their stakes involved. And when it comes to talking to Russia or negotiating with Russia in order to put an end to the war, even for that you need certain credible countries, and that is where India has been placing itself. So that is something that we need to look out for. Now, by the way, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization that I was talking about, these are the countries who are members of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So territorially, as you can see, it represents a majority of the portion of the continent of Asia. It has got 8 member countries, 8 member nations. India was not one of the founding nations. Please keep in mind that particular portion. India is not a founding member. Okay? So overall, if you take a look at the members of SCO, you have China, Pakistan, India, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, and Russia. Notable absences are Mongolia and Turkmenistan in the region, and otherwise the entire region is included in this SCO. So SCO keeps on meeting time and time again to discuss about the regional cooperation, regional growth agenda, and it is through this forum that China has always tried to polarize the entire region and bring all of them deliberately on board the Belt and Road Initiative, the flagship program of China. So that is something which is done by Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Now, at the moment when India is finding everything going along its way, what are the opportunities that lie in front of us? Now, we are all aware, or we must be aware, that when you had the Indian Prime Minister speaking on this G20 forum, he clearly made an unequivocal remark that the global governance structure has failed. Now, when he says that the global governance structure has failed, and when India conveys this message to the world, that means the way that the world has been functioning, the way it is being governed, it is no longer conducive or sustainable enough. Because despite the United Nations being the overarching body, you still have various different countries going on war with each other. You still have grievances which are germinating in every small part of the world. Now we have very recently we had seen Armenia and Azerbaijan being entangled into war, and that too repeatedly. Now we are observing that since 1 year, Ukraine and Russia have been or at war with each other. Now, it is not only about bringing the war to the end. It is also being about representing the voices from various parts of the world. And this is where a reform in the global governance is something which is very high on India's agenda. And when we say the global governance reforms, here we talk about UN Security Council reforms. India has been trying to become a permanent member of the UN Security Council, and it has been trying that for some time now. It has been lobbying with the various different countries. And India's point is very simple, that look, we represent close to around 18% of the global population. We are the 5th largest economy in the world. And how come, despite all of this, we are now the most populous country in the world? Well, now, despite all of this, why is it so that India is still not a member, not a permanent member of United Nations? Now, this particular forum that India has got right now, being the G20 president, being the chair of SCO, that gives it a unique opportunity to further advocate the requirement of reform. For example, you don't have any governance representatives or global governance representatives coming from maybe South America, from Africa. That region is almost absent. So that is something that India wants something to happen. Then, this proves to be a negotiating platform. Negotiating platform between whom? Between Russia and the West. Between the interests that Russia has, or what Russia thinks are its vital interests, and what the West thinks is something which should be met as the essentials of human rights. Now, there needs to be a conversation. If you consistently keep on imposing sanctions upon each other, that is something which will never lead to peace. So that is why there is a need for negotiating and the parties coming together for negotiation, and India provides that unique platform. Then, the energy security. The global oil prices are rising significantly ever since the war on Ukraine has begun. Now, this has left the entire world in a lurch. In fact, the rising energy prices are partly responsible for multiple different governmental changes which we have experienced in countries such as Britain or United Kingdom. And even across Europe, there has been a lot of unease about the energy security because energy prices are rising up. And in total, the entire oil producing countries, they are jacking up the prices from time to time. Now, what it does, once the energy prices go up, now that means that there is an associated inflation which is brought in all these different developing and underdeveloped nations, which makes the living standards to be maintained to be a much more difficult task. And that is where you have large millions of people being pushed into the realms of poverty year after year, and that too month after month. So this is something that India has been vociferous about, and that is where anytime when India is called upon the fact that you are not siding with the West, you are still taking Russian oil, India is very clear about it that we need to ensure energy security for all our citizens. And then the global South and the climate. The global South and its voice, with significant importance given to climate factors and climatic issues, because it is the global South which is suffering significantly because of that. So India needs to be a champion of that. Now that China has risen above in the economic ladder, many of the times, in many of the cases, in many of the discussions, China is not on the same page as the global South. But just because China has given them so much amount of loans and lending is given, that is why they always seek China as their natural leader. It is here that India wants to realign that entire leadership. India wants to gain that position of prominence. But then what are the challenges? Obviously, with opportunities comes certain set of challenges as well. So what are the challenges which lie in front of India? So amongst the challenges, first challenge is the moment shall pass. Meaning what? Meaning that this particular moment of India's diplomatic prominence in the world, that is not going to last forever. After this year, both the presidentship in the case of G20 as well as the chair in the case of SCO, that will pass on to the other nations. So that is why it is important for India to make maximum use of the opportunity that it has. As it is said, make hay while the sun shines. So right now, when the opportune moment lies before us, we have to make maximum use and extract maximum utility out of it, right? Then there are certain limitations to the balancing act. Now, what do we mean by that? Now, India has been playing this balancing act for almost a decade now, where despite India being one of the largest arms exporters from Russia, we have also diversified our relationship with the Western countries, and we are not restricted to any one particular group. Now, always India's role and India's position has been lauded by diplomats across the world, that India manages to find its way despite not angering or poking any of the side. But then again, eventually the world is running out of patience. The entire world is being very vociferous against Russia due to the ongoing onslaught in the case of Ukraine and the ongoing war that we are observing in the case of Ukraine. So that is where eventually this golden moment shall pass. Eventually, our role as the balancer, our role as walking on a tightrope, that is something which the world won't be satisfied upon. So that is why for a large country like India, it becomes very, very important to have a principled stand. And principled stand where we are very clear that it is something which is citizen-centric or human-centric. That kind of principled stand is something which is very separate or something which is very immune and isolated to hypocrisies and the various stands that the different blocs take. So that is why India has to be the advocate for multilateralism, right? Human values, peace, etc. That is something which will enhance the reputation, the overall image that India holds in the Global Committee of Nations. Then you have optics during the diplomatic high. What is this? This is basically the perception which is given. The perception which is given by India to the world regarding what India is doing. As of now, when India is holding these high positions, what is it that India is doing? Is it something whereby India is cozying up with Russia or cozying up with the West or being anti-West, being anti-Russia and so on? So the entire world is watching this. Many of the times you do get a feeling that sometimes India is being overtly aggressive towards the Western nations, or sometimes it is being indifferent to things going on in Ukraine. But there again, we have our own compulsions. So we have to ensure that whatever we do, the perception that is given out to the world is not antagonistic. It is not something, or it should not be something, which the entire world perceives that India is against us, or India's interests, they don't coincide with our own long-term strategic interest. So that is again a challenge for a country like India, where India will have to further keep on carrying this balancing act, but at the same time, unless and until India has a clear principled stand, these issues will keep coming from time and time again. We have to understand that since the time of Jawaharlal Nehru to Atal Bihari Vajpayee to the present Prime Minister Narendra Modi, all the various prime ministers that India has had, all of them have basically tried to convey to the Global Committee of Nations about India's importance in the world. This is the moment of India's importance. This is the moment of reckoning that we have to utilize. And this is where we make ourselves being felt as an important member, as a member without which global governance is incomplete. Now here we have various different examples as well. For example, take the case of Turkey. Now, Turkey as a country, if you think about it, when we say that India is walking a tightrope and India is doing the balancing act, think about Turkey. Turkey, on one hand, is supplying drones to Ukraine in order to kill the Russian forces. And simultaneously, Turkey is also in talks with the Russian forces to supply them ammunitions and to ensure wheat trade and so on. So Turkey, if you take the example of it, any global committee or any global grouping that you think about, Turkey is always an important member, from being a part of NATO to OIC to every important grouping and every decision-making body. Turkey is a member. So that is something that India in itself can take a leaf out of it, and India can have some learnings from the diplomatic policies followed by Turkey in certain cases, not overall, but in certain cases. So in this article, we have basically seen why is it that India is in prominence as of now, what can be the implications, what are the challenges, and we have also taken a look at few of the tidbits here and there. Right? Now, after this, we come to the second news article, that is the hardships of a career in Ayurvedic practice. Now here, when we talk about Ayurveda, Ayurveda is something which has its genesis on this land. And it has been in our cultural traditions for almost more than thousands of years. Right? So that is where it becomes very indigenous to us. That is something which is directly or indirectly practiced in some degrees in all the various households that we have. Now, as of now, in the modern era and in the modern day of cutting-edge science, Ayurveda is not being practiced anymore, and more dangerously, Ayurveda is not being trusted anymore. Nobody trusts the Ayurvedic system of medicine to heal them. So there you have a lot of issues and a lot of difficulties which lie before the entire system. Now here the context of it is that despite the publicity campaigns to promote the entire Ayush sector, that is Ayurveda, Yoga. Ayush here is an acronym. A stands for Ayurveda, Y stands for Yoga, Unani, Siddha and Homeopathy. So all of these, despite receiving a lot of campaign, public support, etc., this is not particularly doing good. And there's a kind of a trust deficit. Okay? Trust deficit between whom? The practitioners and the patients. The patients, they don't trust the system. For understandable reasons, Ayurveda is not the medical system of first choice amongst many people in the country. Now, why is it so? There must be a reason behind it. Because if you take a look at the traditional medicine systems that we had in the entire country, north, south, east to west, it was a kind of a very natural method of providing medicine, and it was a methodology which was trusted all across. But since the time of modern medicines have come in, it is being trusted slightly less. But that is not the only case. It is not only because the modern medicines are better and so on. There is something which is innately and inherently wrong in the entire system itself. So, first of all, the skepticism. The skepticism that you have. For example, let's say you suffer from a very raging cough and cold, or let's say you are suffering from one of the significant diseases. Now, your first choice generally will be the Western system of medicine or the allopathic medicine rather than going to an Ayurvedic practitioner. Now, why is that? Because the results which have been shown that are not evidential enough, in the sense that we don't have enough evidences that, okay, these Ayurvedic medicines can bring about these improvements and these are the side effects, or these are the long-term benefits, short-term benefits. So that kind of a qualitative and quantitative research, disease-centric research, that is something which is lacking. So Ayurveda establishment has failed to keep pace with the intellectual and scientific advances of the time. Now here, when we say scientific advances, one has to understand that nobody expects Ayurveda to come up with the modern form of capsules, etc. Advancements here represent a kind of an empirical evidence that, okay, have you carried out research? Are there enough sample evidences to indicate that what you are prescribing that actually works? Or is it something that you have concocted on your own? Sadly, in many of the cases, the answer is the latter, where many medical practitioners, they are left with no other option but to concoct the medicine on their own and wish for the desired result. That is where it is losing credibility day after day. Now here, you have various archaic theories, because this is not a modern system of medicine. The texts which are available in itself, they are thousands of years old. So that is where you have a lot of information which is given, but many of them are older theories which are no longer relevant or applicable in the modern time. So there needs to be a delegated effort which needs to be put in to sieve out, to filter out the inessentials and to make the entire process or the entire aspect very crisp and substantial. Now, in the aspect of Ayurveda, basically, you have to understand that you have mystified theories leading to dogmas. What is the meaning of this? It means that in the name of Ayurveda, because it is such an ancient science, you have many different theories which are floating around and which keep on floating around. That if you consume this, maybe it will get rid of high blood pressure or sugar problems or so on. Are there enough evidences? The answer is no. Now, as a result of that, this has taken various different forms in various different areas. Why? Because you don't have a particular standard operating procedure. So you have a general lack of standard operating procedure. Meaning what? Meaning that, let's say, for the same illness, let's say something which is very prevalent across the country right now, let's say cough and cold. So for the same illness, if you consult the Ayurvedic practitioners in different parts of the country, all of them or many of them will give you multiple different solutions. And many of the time those solutions, they border on the area of belief systems rather than an understanding of the science. Many of the times it takes the form of superstitions and dogmatic theories as well, that if you wake up at this point of time in the morning, if you do this, and that is when you will get cured. So this is where the general populace is again losing track of that and is failing to associate itself with the requirements fulfilled by Ayurveda. Then we have to understand the basic difference which is present in Ayurvedic system and the general other Western medicine system that we use. And that is the difference between treatment and wellness. While we talk about treatment, you have many diseases and almost all the diseases which require the basic immediate treatment. Now, only around 60 to 70% of that treatment can be provided by the Ayurvedic medicines as of now. As of the research that we have till now, we cannot provide the treatment for all the diseases which are there. For very basic diseases, we can provide immediate relief. But for rest of the various different lifestyle issues, lifestyle diseases such as hypertension, such as diabetes, such as anemia, etc., Ayurveda always promotes a kind of a wellness where you improvise or where you basically strive to be healthy rather than getting cured. So many of the times when we get ill, we want to get cured immediately. We don't think about it, that what should we do that 7 months down the line I will be healthy, wealthy and wise. No. So that is the kind of a balancing act which patients do, and always it comes out that first of all, let us get treated enough. Now, due to this, the practitioner faces many issues. Someone who is a trained Ayurveda practitioner, they also face significant number of issues. And the major issue that they face is the issue of public perception. The public perception is against them. Many of the significant amount of population, they consider the Ayurvedic practitioners as simple or, in a way, people who have not got enough knowledge about medicine and people who are simply following superstitious beliefs. So that is why the perception is particularly low, and that again is why, due to lack of standard operating procedure. Then the college training which is provided to all the different graduates, all the different practitioners, that is something which has got a huge amount of ancient wisdom. But then only a part of that ancient wisdom is practically utilizable as of now. Significant part of that is archaic and no longer relevant in the current setting. So there is a lack of research and correlation in terms of the sample studies that you need to carry out in order to carry out the successful cases, the successful trials. Everything is lacking in this case. Now, Ayurveda can be used safely and efficaciously only in about 60 to 70% of the primary care illnesses. For rest of them, what do you need? You need the intervention of modern medicines. So, for the rest, modern medicines are required. Now here is where the problem arises. And when we say that the problem arises, what is the problem? The problem is that in many different states, in various different states when we talk about it, the Ayurvedic practitioners, they are not allowed to prescribe modern medicines or allopathic medicines. Now the states in itself, in many of the cases, they also have a valid argument that look, unless and until you don't have enough knowledge or enough training in the Western medicine, you should not be the one prescribing that. That is something which leads to many different unwanted impacts and side effects as well. So you should have some basic training. But even for the Ayurvedic practitioners, there should be an option available to go for that basic training of that Western medicine, because in that case, then they would be able to solve larger set of problems faced by a larger population as well. So most states, they prohibit the practice of modern medicine provided by the Ayurveda graduates. So as a result of that, the utility of the Ayurveda graduates, that in itself is very limited and very restricted. Now, the opportunities. So there are significant opportunities which lie in front of us, provided that we overcome this challenge. So what are the opportunities that lie and what can we do? So first of all, if somehow we are able to provide that basic level of training to the Ayurveda graduates and practitioners to be able to provide primary level and the first level of medicinal intervention, that is something which is going to rejuvenate the primary healthcare system in India, which we all know that the doctor to patient ratio is something which is very bad in many parts of the country. So we need more doctors. And when we have the knowledgeable practitioners with a bit of more training, their utility can be increased. They will get better job opportunities as well. And in total, it is the public who will benefit out of it. So that is an opportunity that has to be utilized. Then promote the culture of wellness rather than treatment. The entire quotation of prevention is better than cure. So Ayurvedic system should be promoted in order to bring about the healthy lifestyle which is required in order to get rid of the various different illnesses that we suffer from. Evidence-based research can yield positive results, and this needs to be carried out. Only in this case can the trust, only then can the trust deficit be erased. Okay? Only in that case can we have the trust deficit being erased, and only in that case can we have the people trusting the system again. And as of now, the entire world is teaming up against antibiotics and the impact that the antibiotics are basically having on the entire population, not only humans but also the cattle and also the various different parts of biodiversity. So that is why there is a nascent but at the same time a growing demand across the globe of these natural systems of wellness and treatment. So that is a large market that we can capitalize upon. So that again will provide huge opportunities to Indian medical system, provided it is reliable, provided it meets the modern scientific standards, provided it is honest to itself that what it can cure, what it cannot cure. That honesty is very much a must. Now, this is an area from where UPSC has been frequenting questions in the mains with regards to what needs to be done to make the entire system more usable and also beneficial for the country. Okay? Now, then we come to the third topic, and that is Libya's outlook remains bleak. So here, we talk about the country of Libya. I hope we are all aware basically that it is a country situated in northern part of Africa. And it is a country which is very rich in oil reserves. Generally, you will see countries which are rich in oil reserves, there are certain issues here and there which arise there. Now, Libya had been under the grip of the dictator Muammar al-Gaddafi for a very long time. And basically, February 17th this year, that marked the 12 years since Muammar Gaddafi had been removed. Now, Muammar Gaddafi was always known to be anti-West, to be very significantly dogmatic, and to be very fundamentalist, and also was known for the atrocities that he would carry out on the larger population in general. Now, since Muammar Gaddafi had been upthrown, Libya in itself, just like in the case of the various different countries in the region, take it, for example, Iraq, take the case of Syria, take the case of multiple different countries in the region, Tunisia, and so on. Even the case of Libya, Libya has been embroidered in a kind of a political chair run-up and the tag of chair from here and there. So if you take a look at the entire region of Libya, Libya overall is now being controlled and is dominated by rival political groups. And it is one of those unique countries where each of these groups, they are claiming that the leader of the country is belonging to their own group, and you have simultaneous positions of power being held in different parts of the country. The capital of Libya, for those who are not aware, is Tripoli, right? And it is here, in the region of Tripoli, where you have one of those alliances, that is GNA, and in rest of the areas that you see being marked by blue, you have an increased control by the Tobruk government alliance. So overall, you will see that you have one group which is controlling the capital region, and you have the other group which is slowly and steadily making inroads into the other areas of the country. So here, one has to understand that it is since 2014 that Libya has been experiencing two centers of power. You have the Government of National Accord GNA that is taking care of the region of Tripoli and claiming the control of that, and also the House of Representatives in Tobruk, and that is something which is exercising legislative powers. So again, someone else is exercising executive authority, someone else is exercising legislative power. Now, you don't need to go into the detail of that who are the members of GNA, who are the members of House of Representatives, etc. Not at all essential. What you need to know or extract from this area is basically the conditions that this entire political tussle is pushing Libya into. So, UN representatives or representatives of United Nations, they have termed the entire political fiasco which is unfolding in Libya as redistributive kleptocracy. What is the meaning of redistributive kleptocracy? First of all, if we take a look at kleptocracy, it indicates a kind of a power structure where the people in power, they assume all the wealth, or they, in a way, they start accumulating all the wealth of that region, leaving the people without much of a share of the wealth. So the people in power, they become the concentrators of wealth, right? People in power, they become concentrators of wealth. That is where all the wealth is accumulated. So that is something which is indicated by the term kleptocracy. Now, what is redistributive kleptocracy? It basically indicates a very simple thing. Suppose you have 5 different power centers or 5 different groups who want to stake their claim in power. Let's suppose in the initial 2 years, these two groups, they are in power. So they will earn a lot more, right? They will accumulate a lot of wealth. In the meanwhile, you have groups like this and this, they will start liaising and they will start lobbying with various different friendly nations, friendly groupings. They will start assuming and controlling some part of the power. So when they come in power, some part of the wealth from the earlier accumulation is distributed amongst themselves. So by this cyclical process where someone else is in power, that person earns. When that person goes out, the other person who comes in, that person also earns. So overall, it is a kind of a redistributive mechanism of the country's national wealth amongst the powerful. That is redistributive kleptocracy, and that is something which is almost very, very common in the nations of that region, be it even if you consider countries such as Turkey, the well-to-do countries such as Turkey, if you consider countries such as Iraq or Syria or all these disturbed nations in the region, you will observe this kind of a common thread in them. So that is why this is a terminology that you should be aware of. Now, Libya is also suffering because whenever a country is in turmoil, a lot of foreign players and a lot of foreign interests, they start dangling their own interests in between them. Now, in the case of Libya, you have the nations of GCC, that is the Gulf Cooperation Council members, that is Qatar and UAE. Both of these countries, they are supporting the individual groups, that is GNA and the House of Representatives. They are supporting to each one of them separately, and they are supporting against one another. So as a result of that, there is significant amount of foreign backing, there is a significant amount of monetary support, weapon supply, everything which is given to that group. Due to which suddenly if a group starts weakening, then as a result of the weapons, etc., that they get, they mount a surprise attack and they reclaim the territory. Now, one also has to keep in mind, in international politics, as we say, that there are no permanent friends or no permanent enemies. The one thing that is permanent is national interest. Now, since 2014, both Qatar and UAE, so here they have changed sides in terms of the groups that they are supporting. They have completely reverted their supports. Now, what does that indicate? That indicates that this oil-rich nation, as it is in turmoil, various other nations are basically capitalizing out of it. That is something which should stop. Now, again, another offshoot of a prelims type question which can be asked from here, that is the Gulf Cooperation Council. What is it? You should be aware of. It is a kind of a regional intergovernmental grouping of nations in the region of Middle East. You have Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. The headquarters is situated at the capital of Saudi Arabia, that is Riyadh. And basically, it came into existence, the charter came into existence in 1981. Now, what is significantly relevant about GCC is, all of these are some or the other forms of autocracy, a kind of a monarchy of sorts, right? Where you have hereditary rulers and kings. Some of them, they are complete monarchies, some of them, they are partial monarchies. Now, all these different nations, they felt threatened immediately after the Arab Springs. If you recall, the entire movement of Arab Springs, which rocked the entire region of Middle East and North Africa, the entire region of Middle East and North Africa, starting from Tunisia, they were disturbed in the previous decade because of the Arab Springs. Now, the Arab Springs was in order to democratize the governance setup, and the people were demanding more rights for them. Now, that basic fact that the people are demanding more rights, more governance rights for themselves, that in itself brought nightmares to many of these monarchies. So the Gulf Cooperation Council has started speaking in one voice more prominently so after the threat that it faced since the Arab Springs. And that is why, fearing that threat, the various different member nations, directly and indirectly, they have started intervening in the affairs of the other nations which are going through turmoil to ensure that they themselves are safe. Now, why is it that we are talking about it? Why is it that Libya is important to the world? So, before anything else, one has to remember one thing, that before the entire aspect of the Western attack on Libya happened to overthrow Muammar al-Gaddafi, India had shared a pretty significantly fair relationship with Libya, whereby we were not dependent on Libya, but if in the worst kinds of emergencies, if India had a need, Libya had good enough relationships to fulfill that need. You had many different engineering companies in India who had invested billions of dollars worth of equipments in oil extraction in Libya. So with the turmoil in Libya, many Indian companies, they also significantly suffered. So we have had a good people-to-people connect between Libya and India. Having said that, what has happened in Libya is a template that the world needs to get right. What do I mean by that? So the entire world was made aware that, look, these are the atrocities committed by the dictator of Libya. And this is why Libya is turning out to be a bad place to live in. But what has happened? Ever since that dictator has been overthrown, there has been more political turmoil, there has been increasing instability, there have been private militias coming into the country and capturing and controlling that area. You have many cases of human rights violations happening indiscriminately across the country. So what does that tell you? That tells you that basically what has happened in Libya is not something that the world will take an example of. And we need to get it right, that if you remove a dictator, things become better. We cannot have the example, if you remove a dictator, things will become worse. That should not be the template. Then, development of stark inequalities that we are talking about, where you have few of the people in government, few of the important people, they are becoming much more important, they are becoming much more wealthy, whereas the common population, that is something which is significantly in stark poverty. A playground for mercenaries and militia. A country in turmoil becomes an area where all other nations, they try out various different things. So you would have heard about, in the case of Russian-Ukraine conflict, the presence of Wagner Group, one of the offensive groupings and militia groups launched by Russia to wreak havoc on Ukraine. So that Wagner group is also active in some parts of Libya. You also have mercenaries from Turkey frequently coming to Libya. And already you have Qatar and Oman and UAE also involved in this region. So that is where it is becoming a playground for mercenaries and militias, where a lot of illegal and under-the-table arms deal that also happens, which has the potential to cause instability across the globe. So the world needs to take a proper attention and a proper look at Libya in order to curb that menace. Okay? Now, then we come to the fourth topic, the last topic of the day, the main topic, that is, what are biocomputers and how do they function? So this is a brief topic, important for your paper 3 in general, right? So what are biocomputers and how do they function? So in this, we basically come across a situation where few of the scientists at Johns Hopkins University, they have come up with a situation to devise what they refer to as biocomputer. So they outlined a plan for a potentially significantly important piece of research called organoid intelligence, which aims to create biocomputers. Now, before we delve into that, understand some amount of background. Now, our brain is a very complicated organ, a very complex organ. Time and time again, researchers and scientists, they have tried to understand the brain in order to understand the human behavior, human capacity, human weaknesses, human strengths, and so on. But it has failed largely because the natural and the normal functionings of brain on a daily basis, on a reproductive basis, on a generative basis, that is something which is very hard to replicate in the lab, almost impossible. So generally, what do the researchers do? The researchers, they study the rats and their brain cells because they have some similarity to how our brain cells respond to. Now, recently what has been done is, now that you have 3D printing which is available, so 3D printed organelles, they were brought into existence. Now, these 3D printed ones, so basically in a quest to develop systems that are more relevant to humans, scientists are building 3D cultures of brain tissue in the lab, and these brain tissues are referred to as brain organoids. These are very small, but still they are unable to replicate the entire functionalities and the aspects of human brain. Why? Because you might regenerate a brain tissue, but in the human body, that tissue is consistently being supplied with the help of blood. That particular tissue is consistently being exposed to sensory parts, for example, audio, sight, etc. That leads to its growth. Now, that is something which that organoid cannot do naturally. So what has been done? Some part of that organoid that has been implanted in the rat's brain. And then, upon shining a bright light into the rat's eyes, it was observed that the part of the organoid which was implanted in the rat's brain, that became activated, means it was responding, means it was getting the blood supply and it was responding positively. That behoves particularly well for the future brain research. So, the researchers have announced their plans to basically couple the organoids with the machine learning by growing the organoids inside the flexible structures with multiple electrodes. Why electrodes? To catch the signal, in order to understand when is it that the neurons give the signal, when is it that they receive significantly, and what are the impacts associated. So these organoids will be grown artificially, and then slowly and steadily the part of machine learning is also something which will be given to them, so that they are in a way able to reformate themselves and in a way keep on learning with the passage of time. Now, this will solve much larger purposes. First of all, it will help us understand the stimuli pattern of brain, that when is it and how is it that the brain receives that stimulus. Why? Because we are able to create a kind of an artificial organoid out of it. And that artificial organoid, more importantly, has got that machine learning. Machine learning means self-improvement with the experiences that you have. That organoid keeps on learning itself based upon the already existent experiences. Then response patterns of neurons and human behavior, that is also something which will come to light, because that is why you have the test bed having many electrodes which are present. Neurodegenerative and cognitive disorders that many of us face at some point of old age, or the older age population that you will see, many of them face with these neurodegenerative disorders of the brain. And there are very costly treatments, if at all, which is present, and mostly it is absent. So that again can be an issue which can be solved easily. And then development of stem cell research regarding how to reproduce that brain, that will also come into prominence. So these are the advantages of having a biocomputer. So that in itself is referred to as a kind of a biocomputer. Okay? Now, then we come across to certain brief topics which are relevant for your prelims. Very briefly, we will talk about the gist which is relevant for the prelims. For example, here in page 1, you had a discussion, or the topic in discussion, that is regulators' proposal on Rajasthan power lines that flout Supreme Court orders threatens the Bustards. What does that mean? That basically is indicative of the fact that below a certain amount of power generated, then you don't have enough amount of protection given to these power lines. Now that can be a threat to Great Indian Bustard. Now when we talk about this particular story, the aspects of this story are not important. What this article talks about, etc., not very important for your exam. What is important is the Great Indian Bustard. That is something you should know about. So Great Indian Bustard is The state bird of Rajasthan, a fact you should know, considered to be India's most critically endangered bird, right? And it is considered the flagship species of the grassland ecosystem. This is a kind of a bird that you find in the region of Rajasthan, some parts of Gujarat, and also parts of Pakistan. So this is a kind of a bird which is found, or a species found in an area where you have the semi-arid to arid grasslands which are present. That is where you will find the presence of Great Indian Bustard. Population is confined mostly to Rajasthan and Gujarat. Now, this is a particular species which is significantly endangered, and that is why you have various protection programs being run by the state government as well as by the national government as well. So, the level of protection and conservation status provided to Bustard, again, as per IUCN, the International Union for Conservation of Nature list, it is put under critically endangered. As per the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Flora and Fauna, that is CITES, there again it is put under Appendix 1, which basically means maximum level of protection is given to it. Similarly, CMS, which is also referred to as, this is also referred to as by what convention? What is the name of it? It is the Bonn Convention. So, as per that Bonn Convention, again, it is protected and significantly protected. And there, then even as per Wildlife Act 1972, the Great Indian Bustard is scheduled or put under Schedule 1, representing maximum protection which is provided. So these tidbits of facts you should know. You should be aware that what are the reasons why we keep on losing bustards in large quantities. So many of the times they get entangled in the power lines. Many of the times they get or they suffer from poaching, fragmentation of habitats. So these are the particular issues due to which they suffer from significant loss. Okay? Now, then after that, the second portion which is important for your prelims, and it is with respect to a news story which has been making headlines. That is where various different nations, they have come together under the aegis of United Nations to protect the high seas. Right? When we talk about high seas, we are talking about the deeper water bodies. So there has been an agreement which has finally been hammered out in order to lend conservation and protection to the high seas as well. So here, what do we mean by high seas? What is the exact meaning of it? So the high seas begin at the border of the exclusive economic zones. What are the exclusive economic zones? So from the shoreline of the country, extending up till 200 nautical miles into the sea, that belongs to the exclusive economic zone. So that is something. Beyond that, you have the high seas or the deeper water. Beyond that point, the seas are under the jurisdiction of no particular country. Now, the protection of high seas is very relevant because they end up representing close to and even more than 50% of the Earth's area in general. So their protection is very important. And we did not have an agreement in place till now. So this agreement, first of all, is held under the aegis of United Nations. In the high seas, you have the presence of the entire division of the ecosystem or biodiversity, because we know that in the high seas, when we talk about it, light is able to penetrate only up till a particular level. So you have the presence of a photic zone and what we refer to as aphotic zone, where light is not able to go. It is in that aphotic zone where many critically important species, many fragile species, they live. So their protection is an absolute must. These are the global high seas overall. So closer to the coastline, you have the territorial waters. Away that you go, you have the high seas. So again, few of the data pointers that you can use for your prelims examination. Oceans cover more than 70% of the planet's surface. That is something all of us know. Oceans have absorbed close to around 90% of the global heat. Right? So they are important systems. The global heat, which is increasing day by day, that needs to be taken in as well. Okay, so that is the aspect with regards to conservation of high seas, and also this fits the bill, or this helps achieve the target set as per COP15 of Convention of Biological Diversity, or what is also referred to as Kunming-Montreal Agreement. Okay, so there you had a global 30 by 30 goal which was set in a way that 30% of the global land and water bodies that need to be brought under protected area by the year 2030. So that goal, that is 30 by 30 goal, that is something which shall be fulfilled by this particular act of protecting the high seas. Then we come to another important part with regards to the prelims. So ISRO is about to perform a very significant precise maneuver in order to bring the satellite into lower orbit. So here experimentation of controlled re-entry of the already decommissioned satellite. Now what is that satellite? That is something you need to be aware of. So that satellite is named Megha Tropiques 1. So the name in itself gives you a partial idea. Megha Tropiques. So it is a collaboration between India and France. Right? So for example, here France is it is the French term tropiques, which basically refers to tropical area. Now it is a kind of a satellite mission whereby the energy budget of the planet and also how heat is distributed from the tropical area to the other area of the planet, including the region of troposphere, the water cycle which is at play in the troposphere, and how it redistributes the heat. That is something which was studied by this. Oftentimes you get this kind of a question that what was the purpose of this particular mission? You should be aware of that. So it is a satellite mission to study the water cycle of the tropical atmosphere in the context of climate change and also heat redistribution from troposphere to the rest of the planet. Because when we talk about troposphere is where all the climatic actions unfold. So that is why troposphere is where you will experience various climatic activities. That is something due to which, and in order to study that, this particular Megha Tropiques was launched. Now it is already decommissioned. Okay, so the purpose, the countries involved, you should be aware about. Then another small important one with regards to the government's decision to introduce Nano DAP fertilizer. DAP is diammonium phosphate. So also government is pushing the introduction of this DAP fertilizer. So one should be aware about the utility of this. So what is it? DAP fertilizer, first of all, you need to know, consists of phosphates as well as ammonium. Ammonium is rich in nitrogen. And we know that the plants need the availability of which nutrients? Major nutrients: nitrogen, phosphorus or phosphates, and potassium. So this DAP has got the availability or the ability to provide some amount of nitrogen and phosphate at the same time. So what it does is that this is released and it immediately makes the conditions alkaline. It significantly increases the pH value to become more alkaline. So it's highly soluble and thus dissolves quickly in soil to release plant available phosphate and ammonium, and it provides an alkaline pH around the region. So if the soil is already alkaline in a region, DAP will only make it worse. That is why under neutral soil conditions, that is where it is more fruitful. Now, what help does it do? Why is it that you apply this fertilizer? It helps in root development. Now it is from here that you get questions in the prelims. Okay, what is the benefit of phosphate? What is the benefit of nitrogen in the plant? So it helps in root development, plant maturation, and also in seed development, so that future reproductive propagation, etc., is carried out efficiently in a way. At the same time, DAP also acts as a fire retardant. For example, you can mix DAP along with other ingredients and spray it strategically to bring an end to the forest fires many of the times, which keep on raging. So in the case of DAP, what is it that you need to know for prelims? First of all, other than nano urea, this is the other fertilizer where the nano utility has been encouraged and provided by the government. First. Second, DAP consists of phosphate as well as nitrogen. Third, DAP is significantly used for root development, for plant maturity, and also for seed development. Fourth, it makes the soil alkaline. So for alkaline soil settings, it is not good. It is completely soluble, so can be passed off or can be applied with the various irrigational methods. And fifth, it also acts as a fire retardant. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the entire session. And now the couple of questions, mains type of questions for your practice sakes. So here, this is for 250 words, 15 marks. That is, discuss the utility of various global groupings in the modern era, right? And the second part, elaborate upon India's approach towards these global commons via the organizations and the challenges that lie ahead. So it is a kind of a very generalistic question. That is why 15 marks or 250 words. So here, first of all, in the introduction, you have to talk about what the global groupings are. Right? So global groupings indicate a committee of certain nations, member states who have the same aim or a larger geopolitical idea or the larger geopolitical strategic goal that they aim to achieve, for which they get together. India traditionally has been a part of multiple of these groupings right since the time of independence. Now that completes your introduction. In the body part, that is where you start talking about the utility. Now you start with the very basic, that how the entire, and in one sentence you can write that the entire genesis of United Nations lies on the failure of the League of Nations. So that is where there is always learnings, there are inadequacies, so the advantages, disadvantages, everything you have to write, and whether they are utilizable in the multipolar world, that is again something you have to write. Eventually, in conclusion, conclude in a positive note by saying that overall, with the aim to promote the larger global commons and in order to promote peace and sanctity across the world, we do need ideals rather than groupings, and ideals is what should be followed. So that is where you can frame your answer, and you are independent to do that based upon your writing standard. The second question, this is something which you can write for 150 words. That is, discuss the role and the challenges faced by Ayush branches of medical practice in India. So basically, what is the role? Role you can write in the introduction. First of all, write what is the entire full form of Ayush. Then after that, in the role you write that the impact that they have at the household level, at the local level, and also the challenges that we have talked about, and slightly provide a way forward at the time of conclusion, and you will get good marks. So that is all from our side today. See you again tomorrow. I hope this session has been helpful to you. If you have found this session to be helpful, please don't forget to click on like, share, and subscribe, and leave a comment behind regarding what you thought about the content of the session. So see you again tomorrow. Till that point of time, take care of yourself. Thank you and goodbye.